This is the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. This podcast was created to be there for any individual who feels like they are at a low point in life and are confused, seemingly alone, and helpless in their situation. I am a recovering alcoholic, and I felt this way too, until I sat across the table from another addict who shared his story and made me realize that I was not alone in my struggles. My life was saved by this realization, and I hope to help anyone struggling by sharing my story to show you that you are not alone and that life can contain unbelievable riches and meaning. Welcome. I am glad you are here. Hey folks, welcome to another episode of the Chapter 3 Stigma Podcast. This episode will be a little different than the ones or the series that we've had in the recent past. And in this one, I'm bringing my wife, Alyssa, back in to just kind of record a significant milestone and a significant check-in for us. So this podcast will be published on June 27th, which is 6 months to the day that we lost Lucy. Lucy was born December 20th, 2023, and she passed away on the 27th of December. So we thought it would be both healthy for us and potentially helpful for others to just kind of record a bit of a check-in between us. And obviously what we'll cover here, Alyssa and I have been pretty well tied out on over the past 6 months as we've continued our journey in life and really strove to learn how to live with the loss of our daughter. But these moments and this opportunity to sit down and be deliberate about our check-in is just unique. And so we're going to cover basically what we have been up to in the last 6 months and how we're doing. So, Alyssa, anything to say before we hop in?
Well, I'll just say that I have a box of tissues next to me just in case there's any sadder moments. We don't know exactly what's going to come up in this podcast. Mm-hmm. So to all you listeners out there, please bear with us as we are doing this pretty live and in the moment. Nothing has really been prepared ahead of time here.
Right. We're trying to make this kind of raw and uncut as much as possible. So
that's how most of our conversations go with people when we do talk about her. So, I mean, it's a check-in just as much as it is for us as it is for, her story as a whole. Yeah.
And so just to give kind of a broad sweeping overview of what our journey has been in the last 6 months since we lost Lucy, we wound up staying in Minnesota for 5 weeks, about 5 weeks after we lost her. And in all honesty, that was a shorter time period than I anticipated. We always had an idea that a loss was a significant probability in our scenario, and my assumption in making the move was that we would have stuck around Minnesota for quite some time. We have a ton of support there and family, but there was just something compelling about coming back to Boise with regards to being able to take our next step in our grief. And I think both of us agreed as we were hitting that time period where the move was becoming closer and closer that it was just the right timing to come back. I don't know. It's hard to describe exactly why, but there was something about getting back to our own space, and a phrase that we were using a lot at that time was figuring out our new normal. Mm-hmm. And it just seemed like getting back to our home in Boise was becoming a requirement and like the required next step for being able to continue down the road of figuring out that new normal.
Yeah, I would say too, like we were incredibly grateful for all the support and help that we had received while we were gone. But there was a piece of it where like we needed to take back ownership and responsibility for our lives. So Kyle and I are both firstborns in our family, and we're pretty independent people as a result of that. And so like, I mean, we of course needed all the support that we could get when we were in Minnesota. But coming back to our space, it just felt like it would help us to regain some of that control, I guess you could say. And then also just like give, like for me especially, at least, I don't know about you, Kyle, but like it allowed me to like build some confidence back up in who I was. Like I felt like there was a piece of that where like no matter how many times we were told that like, you know, we were creating the best environment for our daughter to be, you know, growing while I was pregnant with her, and you know, we were doing all the right things to get to a space where we could help her to potentially thrive, and that, you know, there wasn't any sort of control that we had over, or you know, knowledge of anything that like was a cause from us in terms of why there was a genetic variant that had occurred. Like despite all of that, like there still is just like this feeling of like how we created a child that was struggling, that we did, you know, this situation, you know, was it because of us? We know it wasn't. We were told it wasn't. But, you know, in some ways it was just, there's a confidence piece that gets hit a little bit when we went through this experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So we moved back to Boise in late January. I started work back up sometime in early February, and then you started going back in early March. Mm-hmm. We got Grant back to daycare again, just kind of taking the steps back into really the fast lane
normalcy
of life. Yeah, again, finding that new normal. As I say the fast lane because one of the obvious lessons, and anyone who has lost or suffered or experienced something of incredible magnitude in their own lives can connect with this. That moment that you realize the rest of the world continues on, and you look at a stranger in the grocery store as an example and just realize that they have no idea what you've been through. They have no idea about your suffering, about your story. And it is just a really stark realization that almost could make it feel like you have to play catch up with the rest of the world as you're going through this grieving process. But I think one thing that we have done well through all of this, I should say as well as we possibly could, is to recognize that our grieving only goes at a certain pace, and that we can't be judgmental or hard on ourselves for feeling like it's slow progression, or that, again, the looking out at the world and just seeing things move forward and go so fast. And so really in that time that we got back here and started taking those small steps back into our new normal, our focus was really intense around our health, our family, and our healing. Mm-hmm. And it is interesting because, so Alyssa kind of alluded to this earlier, but from that health standpoint, it's like we know, because we did extensive testing, we know that what happened with Lucy was an incredibly random, low probability event, and it was an event that happens in life that is just completely random, entirely out of our control. But I do think, and again, I think it's healthy that we at least recognize it. I do think that, Alyssa, both of us have taken like a really crystal clear like lens to our own health and what we control, or I should say like a different lens. And like each of us have taken fairly significant steps and made some fairly sweeping changes in our own lives just with regards to our health, because I think, I don't know, in part the whole situation just made you realize like how fragile things really are. And so, doing what we can and giving ourselves even a small percentage chance of, a longer and healthier, I guess, lifespan and any potential, like, I don't know, future pregnancies that we might have, just giving us the best shot in that regard.
Yeah, one of the things that we discussed early on when we returned, in terms of health was, we're in our mid-30s. We have one child who is under 3 years old, and the hope that there will be future children, or another child, we'll say. And so the idea is we want to be able to be around as long as we can. We want to be able to be as active with our children as long as we can. We want to be able to be active grandparents. And I know you brought this up in other podcasts that you talked about physical health in as well, but it was something that you not only want for yourself, but we have discussed as partners, and in raising our child, and honoring Lucy as well. Like physical health has helped our emotional recovery too.
Yeah.
And
sure.
So that was like a big deal to us when we returned. And I took a longer time off than Kyle did, partially because I recognized that I was still recovering from the delivery of a baby, the same as I would have with our son. And so I took the time very similarly to what I did take with him. And, the thought is, of course, that some of that is bonding with the child and whatnot, but it was also for me a physical recovery in terms of what I had been through and getting to a place where I could actually do my job in a healthy standpoint as well. So that was definitely a part of the physical healing process for me as well.
Yeah. And I think, one other aspect of both coming back to Boise, but then our time, shortly thereafter, with regards to the healing aspect, is what I guess, call it like a step change occurred with regards to building and strengthening our sense of community here. One thing that really stands out to me, shortly upon returning, it's like we had, a neighbor see that we were back and that we were home, and they came over and just gave us a hug. And
yeah, they gave us a hug. They sat down and just talked to us. And, they opened up about some commonalities that we all experience through life, and just how we're not alone, I guess, ultimately is what it came down
That's
to.
Exactly.
Is we're not alone in our, ups and downs that we all experience through life.
Yeah. And we've been very open, and actually we desire to talk about Lucy and share her story. And one of the things that we've noticed and learned is that as we open up, it allows for space for the other person that is listening, that we're talking to also share on their own suffering, their own struggles. And so just across the board, it's just the relationships that we had here just became incredibly strengthened and deepened. And it's like in whatever 4.5, 5 months of being back here now, it's like we've made more genuine connections and deepening of the relationships in that time than we did in the 4.5 years that we were here previously. And then on top of that, I feel like we have covered this in some of the previous podcasts as well, but just the deepening of the love, affection, and relationship with family. I think both of us are very blessed to have a strong core family and relationships across the board there. And each of us gets along with the other's family in a very healthy and loving way. But those relationships just have grown and deepened quite immensely.
Mm-hmm. I think another thing that we have gotten time to contemplate and has added to our experience in grief is our ability to form some language around what we've been through and to like really reflect upon what we've been through.
Mm-hmm.
And that was something that like we needed to be back in our space and physically be back within the walls of our home that we had been creating for the arrival of our daughter, in hopes that we'd be able to return home with her and to be back in that space and to, you know, have that empty room, I guess you could say, was difficult, but it also allowed us to, you know, like physically realize what was physically in front of us and helped us to, you know, maybe put a grasp on the reality of the scenario. Yeah. And through all the discussions that we've been able to have with friends and new acquaintances, it allows us to really, you know, form an understanding and a good way of presenting Lucy's story and allowing her life to still be honored, even as we continue on here with our lives.
Mm-hmm.
So another thing that we were very set on doing as well was just like, okay, so like, what are we going to dive into here when we return? We're kind of project people. What are we going to dive into when we return that's going to help us to remain anchored in our lives, but also in honoring our daughter as well? And so some of that was like, you know, is it working out? Is it, for me, it was doing a daily devotional, and I can't say that I'm good about doing it every single day, but it's there for me when I need it. I like to read a lot. I read about other people's stories, and, you know, there's a lot of really good books out there that have been helpful to me in terms of just, I don't know, relating to other people, hearing their experiences as well with loss and just, you know, what's come of that. And it's inspiring as well. You know, taking quiet time, being able to sit in our yard. And
Mm-hmm.
we've both always said that, you know, for us, like being out in nature is very healing and very comforting for us. And so, we've been trying to take time to be outside a little bit more, or to, you know, go for a hike with our son and, you know, things like that as well.
And just being deliberate about those things.
Mm-hmm.
I think one thing that stood out to me that has been a really healthy I think tool for us is just being able to pause and recognize when certain activities are done with a healing mindset, or in terms of being driven by grief.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think one risk that you can fall into when you have these significant moments of grief and loss and suffering is to find yourself doing things and not understand what the underlying driver is, because I think it can turn pretty unhealthy quickly, And I think like working out is a good example because you can always carry that to an extreme. And I think we have been really aware of why we're doing what we're doing, and we talk about it and we recognize it. And so Alyssa described like she gets a lot out of reading other people's stories. The most healthy thing that I have gotten into since we got back is writing and getting my thoughts out of my head, because I just have a mind that if I don't have an outlet for it, if I don't have a way to take all those thoughts that are spinning around in my head, they're going to morph into something that is not beneficial to me, is not beneficial to our family. And so I've found it incredible. Like the actual practices that I've done are morning journals, as well as just writing the newsletter. And that weekly newsletter has really been my outlet to just sort my own thoughts out and allow me to think and to put language and words to the things that I'm feeling, because that was a very bad and impactful weakness of mine when I was struggling with alcoholism. Was I didn't have the emotional vocabulary to even describe what was going on in my head. And so I've really pushed and attempted to use the right words for what I am feeling and what I am experiencing. And if in talking to Alyssa, for example, if I can't come up with the words, it's like I try to describe it as best as I can and just get the things that are spinning around in my head that could cause chaos, get it out, so that it doesn't build up. Because allowing things to build up and just having this like overflow bursting of a release is what really hurt us in the past. And I don't think we have been perfect by any stretch in these last 6 months. I think there are numerous examples where it's like we didn't do a good job of communicating or expressing that we were struggling in the moment, and it turned into, like an outburst or a lash out or something like that. Like what stands out to me is during the month of March, from Lucy's like date of birth, like from the 20th to the 27th of March, it took me multiple days to realize, but I was in this incredible funk, and it was unexpected, and it hadn't happened in the months before. And I didn't even realize that we were in this like anniversary period of Lucy's life, but I was really struggling with work and just getting really angry and upset and emotional, and just things were impacting me that weren't normally impacting me. And I don't know what it was, if it was a conversation that we were having or something else, but I finally just realized it's like, this is my first time going through this anniversary period of her life and death alone, because Alyssa had gone back to work. The month before, I had been working, but Alyssa had been home. So I had, and in reflecting back during that month in February, I realized I was taking a lot of breaks during the workday to just go and talk to her and kind of decompress. And then in the month of January, we were still in Minnesota and around family and with each other, both not working. And so that was just an example of like, if I wasn't able to express or define well, or at least communicate that I didn't know what was going on or didn't understand what was going on, it built up into a lot more stress and worry and just like strife that occurred in our life during that brief period, those few days, and we really needed to. So that caught me completely off guard. And I think there's been a lot of examples of just being unexpectedly like sideswiped a little bit with emotion or struggle or frustration.
I think that we're learning a lot through this process, too, on just like what we need to do as each month passes. And, we'll get into it here, a little preview. Kyle had incredible foresight in terms of suggesting that we take a little break every couple of months as a family and, really focus on ourselves. And we'll get into that a little more here in a bit. But we just learned through that process of having this week every month where we look at these dates and we say, okay, well, on this day 5 months ago we were dealing with this various scenario. And so we're learning through that, like what do we have to do to set ourselves up for success, or to be kinder to ourselves and be ready for whatever emotions are going to come up. Or we'll be out, let's say we're out to dinner or something, and we see a family that has a child that might be around the same age as Lucy. Like, how do we set ourselves up to handle that emotionally as well? That's been a big change for us, or something that we've had to really consider. A couple other things that came to mind as you were talking there, Kyle, were, we're still seeing a counselor. Every couple of weeks or so, we see our counselor and we discuss various things. We have a variety of things that we can discuss, but depending on what time of the month the appointment is happening, maybe Lucy is going to be our bigger topic of discussion at that time, or something that's come up with her will be a part of that discussion. I think another thing that you didn't mention, but I think is important too, as you're talking about getting your feelings out, is your week is fairly scheduled, but you still put a lot of precedence in going to AA. Mm-hmm. And I was actually able to attend Kyle's AA meeting that he got his 1-year chip at. And, that's a celebration for us to hit that point. And so, kind of off of that as well, like we did celebrate that moment, and right. We're celebrating these, smaller moments in time, or like every month when we hit the week of Lucy's life, the 20th to the 27th, we try to get like a bouquet of flowers and just have flowers in the house. And we really just try to bring her up with Grant, our son, as much as we can, and in like a normal, healthy way, and just like having her be a part of our discussion and answer his questions as they come up. And then, one moment he'll be asking about Lucy, and the next moment he says, can I have some crackers or whatever? Yeah. And it's just, he's 2.5, and we have to learn to laugh it off a little bit.
Yep. It honestly, I think it makes us a little bit more resilient to it. I think there's a ton of parallels to the more personal journey that I went through coming out of rehab, or just in dealing with my alcoholism, and also this journey that we've been on in learning how to live with the loss of Lucy. And you mentioned something that really stood out to me, that has a strong parallel, and that is the fact that infants are going to continue being born, and families are going to welcome little girls into their lives, newborn girls into their lives. And there is nothing that those families, those individuals did that they should feel sorry about. And it's just one of those things. It's like, what is our count at with regards to how many friends, close friends, relatives are pregnant, having kids? It was like upwards of 16 at one point, just in this short stint of time, where we had found out about Lucy's health condition and then lost her. And it's just this fact of life. It's like children are going to continue being born, and
the majority of them are going to be healthy.
Yes, there is an aspect of it where it's like, and this is similar with the parallel to the alcoholism, was when I was being driven home from rehab by my close friend and realizing that within a 15 to 20 minute drive at 6 a.m. on a Monday morning in Idaho, which is a conservative state, I could have legally bought my drug of choice at 6 different locations. And I just had this realization that it's like, whoa, this is just a fact of life that I am going to have to live with and be around. And I think because of that perspective and that experience, call it in like a little bit of a practice scenario or smaller scale with alcoholism, as serious as it was, it did help us be prepared for that with Lucy. Like we have had hard moments seeing other infants where it's just like you realize, you think about where, at least for me, you think about where you would be developmentally with your child. Just like, oh, she would be smiling now, or we probably would have made her giggle. Would we have been trying her first solid foods? Like what all that experience would have brought and been with. And those are like the emotions that have really been brought up when you see another family with a child. But I can say from my perspective, at least, there's never been a resentment against another family for having a healthy pregnancy. And as rude as that sounds to say, I guess, I actually think that's not the norm. I think normally it would be easy to like feel slighted or lash out at God or lash out at others for essentially having what you so desperately wanted. And so, yes, it has been difficult, but it has also been made easier in some cases by, I think, having the perspective that we gained in dealing with the alcoholism first, at least from my perspective, because it was like a practice that I had to have. I think, obviously in that case, Alyssa, you were a little more of a support role in that case. Whereas with Lucy, you're obviously front and center of it. But I don't know if that made any sense to you.
No, it did. I will say that I don't know that I have the same thought process when I see, or when we talk about like what would Lucy be doing at this point, because logically in my brain I know that Lucy wouldn't have been doing these things even if she had continued to survive.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think about it more like a completely parallel scenario to Lucy at all. Like I don't even allow myself, and I think it's probably self-preservation, I don't know exactly, but if we had a different baby, a baby that did not have a genetic variant the way that Lucy did, I think about those things. Or, I guess it's more of the what if scenario, like what if we gotten pregnant at a different time, or, like something along those lines. I think about it more like that than I do of like, what would Lucy be doing at this point? Because, and I think this is a piece that like really stuck out to me with our counseling, especially, that this was always meant to be Lucy's story. She was always meant to have the life that she had. We were always meant to go through the experience that we did. And we are moving in the direction that we're moving now as a result of her life. And so for me, I look at it in terms of like, of that essentially.
Yeah.
And
no, that is healthy.
Yeah. It's different, I know, than what you're saying here. And I mean, I think what I look at more is I see our son playing with like his stuffed animals. Yes. Or like today, specifically today, this morning, he asked for this like little baby carrier thing that he got with a little baby doll that was given to him on his birthday, just like after finding out about Lucy. But it was obviously purchased before we knew that something was going on. And it was like he pulled it out today and he wanted to wear his baby around and like care for his baby. And I think of it in terms of that. And I've looked at it that way. I want to say like even since like around New Year's time, I remember just looking at him and seeing the scenario. And it's more so like a mourning of, what of his ability. Like I feel like he's been robbed in some ways of caring for that living sibling.
Yeah.
And cultivating a relationship with her.
He's developed and matured into like a very caring individual. And like this, he walked down the stairs with that baby carrier on, and he's so proud of it, and talking about caring for his baby. And then he comes down by me and the dog's on the couch, and he's just like snuggling up with the dog and just again expressing this level of affection that it's like, I love our dog, but man, I wish that affection was pointed at a younger sibling. And I also need to catch myself. Like one of the aspects that I found myself, say like, this is a little harsh, but say like falling short of expectations on, or being unreasonable with expectations on, others, like early in the journey of, recovering from the loss of Lucy is, when Grant would misbehave and kind of draw a lot of attention to himself and truly act like a bit of a stuck-up only child, I found my mind going to this place where it was like the thought pattern was like, you shouldn't be the only one with attention on you right now. And that was on, like I say that fully well knowing that is unfair to him. And I would catch myself, and I started to catch myself a lot quicker. And like that thought pattern has subsided as we move forward. But that was one surprising reaction that at least I felt through all of this. And again, it's just like when you step back and think about it, it's like Grant did nothing. He's behaving like a 2-year-old. It is the emotions and the weight of the loss that was bearing down on me. But it truly was, it was very unexpected. And I'm glad, like we've talked about it before, I'm glad it was something that we caught, and we're kind of able to address early on.
Yeah, able to recognize it for sure. And, with him, it's, our mentality has always been like, we really just want to like talk about Lucy as much as she organically comes up. We don't want to, force a situation, but we also don't want to like not have her come up at all. We want to make sure that she's still part of Grant's life and that he gets to play the big brother role to her. And he is still her big brother. And, we want that to be how things are, and that she comes up a lot, and she does. And she's in our, we have pictures of her in our home, and,
he asks to see pictures of her all the time
to see pictures of her. And we've realized, like, I guess a phrasing that we've used through all of it is that we're not trying to like get over her by any means. There is no getting over. There is never going to be any replacement of her. But it's learning to, live with that new normal and how that looks for us. And right now for us, that it feels like maybe the fog is lifted a little bit, like the deep levels of grief that we were in this winter. And, I've heard parallels to, winter being, or to grief being thought of as like a winter season where it's cold and you're very internal with your feelings. And, now we're in summer now. And, as the seasons have kind of shifted, it does feel like our grief has shifted as well.
It's evolving. We're learning, we're growing. But I'm extremely grateful for that perspective that we had. And I don't know where it came from. I don't know. I don't care who came up with it or brought it forward first, but like truly we talk about learning to live with the loss instead of getting over her. I think that is one aspect of our society lately that has been kind of an unfortunate downturn with regards to dealing with grief and loss, is this aspect of like, tough it out, get over it, move on. It's like, hey, like, come on, she's our daughter. We don't want to move on from her. Honestly, one of the early fears that I had shortly after her loss was that her memory would fade and that I would forget her, or that others would forget her. And, we do have to be in touch with reality. It's like there are people in our lives who aren't going to think about her as much as we think about her. And so it's like you have to be forgiving of that. Like, everyone has their own lives, and their own story is their biggest concern and front and center. But there is this weird aspect where I was actually fearful that I would start forgetting about her. And I don't know if I've told you this. There was one night, so I tend to go to bed earlier than Alyssa. And there was one night where I was going to bed and I was in that weird stage of like kind of falling like lucidly asleep or awake. And I realized I couldn't remember her name. And I was, it was the strangest thing. And it like startled me awake, and I had to remember her name. And then I remembered her name, and it was like, oh my gosh, like that was terrifying. And again, that was early on when I had this fear of forgetting her.
Yeah.
And
I had an experience like that too early on. So when we were still in Minnesota, we were doing swim lessons with our son, and our nephew was also doing swim lessons with Kyle's sister at the same time. And so we would all essentially go over there as a family because there was a little like splash pad area, and it had been like a busy day. I don't remember what we had been doing that day, but I remember it was kind of a whirlwind, like getting in the car, everyone over there, getting checked in and whatnot. And I wasn't swimming. I was just watching everyone play in the pool, and there's like a lot of loud water sounds going on and whatnot. And I was just kind of in my head thinking like, okay, did we remember to bring everything? He has a swim diaper on, all those little pieces. And I was like, gosh, something really feels like it's missing. Like I forgot something. And then I realized that what I had forgotten was the fact that our daughter wasn't there, and she wasn't going to be there, but it was like she had been so front and center in my mind. And for 45 minutes of time or whatever it was, she hadn't been front and center suddenly. And it like popped back into my head. And it was like this kind of icky feeling. I don't know if yours was when you experienced it,
totally.
But it's like, wait a second, this is reality. Like this is going to be how it's going to be. Everything that we do moving forward, she's physically not going to be there with us. And that's the reality of it. And, we talk to Grant all the time about, she's in our hearts, and she truly is in our hearts. And we do think about her constantly, and maybe not like intentionally thinking about her, but she is a part of our lives, and we're never going to be able to separate that.
Yeah. I mean, I can say that despite having that early fear, I genuinely think about her almost every waking moment. It's one of those things that has almost just become foundational to my thought patterns, and everything is just she's always there, and she's always present.
Is it kind of like an awareness of who you are?
Yeah.
Like I think of it that way.
Yes, absolutely. And it hasn't been thinking about her in an aspect that is like debilitating, where it's you're almost entering into a depressive state where you're not getting out of bed. You're stop taking actions that like maintain me on the road of recovery, and doing all those things that are needed and healthy for you to move forward. But it's just like she's constantly there, and it's been honestly like a great aspect to this that I didn't think would be there in this manner, because it's like I either thought I would be moving on and forgetting about her, or thinking about her constantly and not being able to do anything. And it has actually been the case where she's there. I like how you said that she's part of my personality.
It's like your identity, right?
It is, yeah.
Like,
I mean, I'm her father.
Kyle Zabrowski.
Yeah.
I am X feet tall. You know, like, it's kind of like one of those, like, I won't give away your height on this podcast.
Why did we go to height? We're talking our daughter. Gosh. All right.
Okay. Sorry. This is our dark humor, everyone. Every once in a while it'll come out. We just kind of get sidetracked because, you know, life still has to have a little bit of humor injected in there every once in a while.
Yeah.
So.
But yeah, I would say overall it's just been like in the day to day, and in the, when you measure by the minutes and the hours, it just feels like you question if things are improving. You're questioning if we are navigating this in a healthy and appropriate manner.
There's a couple ways I feel like we've been able to measure that. And one of them is like our ability to discuss with other people what has gone on.
Yes.
I think that, like, originally it was kind of, you know, we were in the deep fog of grief, and it was really hard to even like discuss it in a succinct manner. Mm-hmm. But now it's become easier in some ways to discuss it. I don't know if easier is the right word, but
it's just like the weight or the amplitude that the emotions hit you when you do talk about her or think about her have become more manageable. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't know, there's a strengthening of us and our ability the more we do talk about her. And there also is just the aspect of time. Like, time does have a healing component to it. And so we do have these moments where we realize that it's like, oh, we are stepping back into new normal. We are learning how to live with her in a healthy and sustainable manner. Live with that loss. And, one of the ways that I've realized it, that we've realized it, is like, it's been surprising how we've actually been able to step up and be there for others in the past 6 months. Like, I never would have expected that in just 6 months' time, but connecting with others who have gone through similar losses or similar moments of suffering and struggle, either in the past or like currently they are going through it, and just being able to be there. And there's an aspect of meaningfulness that gets injected into Lucy's life and Lucy's story when we do have those moments, because it's like, wow, she allowed us to be there for these people. Without her and without the lessons that she taught us, we wouldn't have been able to be there and support these people that we love, that are in our lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another thing that has been cool for us with Lucy is just being able to like share her story and find commonality with people that are complete strangers too.
Yeah.
And for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it's just someone you randomly meet and they say, how many children do you have?
Yeah.
And answering that question is more complex than 2.
Yeah. There's a I think we're learning how to make a game time decision if someone can handle it,
right,
or not.
Read the room
for sure. It's like I've been asked that question in like work meetings where everyone's on Zoom.
Right.
There's like 4 people I don't know. People aren't turning their cameras on, and in that situation, it's I have a almost 3-year-old, son.
Right.
And we cut it at that. It's like, that's not a door I want to open when we're just making small talk before a meeting. But yeah, like Alyssa said, we've had incredibly unexpected and intensely deep, meaningful conversations and connections, and with individuals that, for all intents and purposes, were strangers in the moments before. And then it's just like, I don't know, it's some feeling, some sense that it's like, I think they can handle Lucy's story, and I think it's worthwhile to share it and to tell them. And I mean, just a few examples of just incredible friendships that have sprouted out of it.
Well, I think it's also given us a perspective of, you really don't know what's going on in someone else's
Exactly.
life.
Everyone's suffering.
In terms of, go back to your grocery store scenario. Like, maybe someone, I don't know, pulled in the parking lot, they cut you off or something like that. Like, I have no idea what's going on in their world or what's going on in their vehicle even, let's say. And so, just keeping that in mind in terms of, like, maybe I go into the grocery store and I choose to use the self-checkout because I don't want to make small talk with someone that day. Like, the same scenario can happen in reverse, and we're just learning to be a little bit more understanding of that scenario too. I know that's like a weird example maybe, but it is something I think about. And also that, like, talking to these people or opening it up to a stranger gives you like a very raw example of how people are meant to live in community.
Yes.
And people learn from each other and want to share in each other's experiences, not in an invasive way, but in terms of just caring and being there for each other. And that's amazing. It's kind of a beautiful thing to witness and be a part of.
It really is. And a few days after Lucy was born, we actually sat down and we detailed out and wrote out some, what we felt at the time were some key lessons that Lucy had given us up to that point. And so I'm actually curious to read through these together and just talk through, really have any changed or have any been amplified in the 6 months since losing her. So the lessons were, number one, a belief in something greater makes suffering bearable. Number two, science still has so many unknowns. Number three, be satisfied with every goodbye. Number four, respect how others deal with emotions. Number five, never lose your sense of humor. And number six, purpose is measured in impact of those around you, not in time on this earth. It's interesting to look back. I mean, I would say almost across the board, like, they've been almost all been amplified. And I think my belief in these lessons has been strengthened. I think specifically the one about being satisfied with every goodbye, like, just what I realized was we live in such a safe and seemingly controlled world these days that despite the one commonality that every single one of us has, that we will die someday, that our loved ones will die, we are still caught off guard and struck by these situations because, for whatever reason, as humans, we don't want to believe it. And my perspective on all of that has changed because of Lucy, and it's just become really obvious to me. It's like we all have finite time on this earth here. So if you have something, and this is a little bit of a build off of this, but like, if you have something that you want to say to someone, say it. Like, I've really, and it ties in with being satisfied with every goodbye, because I am finding that I don't leave many, if any, conversations these days without expressing my sincere thoughts and gratitude generally with an individual, because I just don't want to find myself in a situation where I reflect back and that conversation turned out to be the last one that I had with someone, and I have this memory that I didn't tell them I love them. I didn't tell them how meaningful of a relationship it is that we have. And so I've just been incredibly open with sharing what others make me feel and what the relationships mean to me, and even down to the level of like actions of, gosh, you inviting us over for dinner, like that's so meaningful for us, even going through, or especially while we're going through experience, just those types of comments and thoughts, I don't really hold them back anymore.
Yeah, I think that as I'm reading through this list here, because you did write these down, I think one, there's great power that you wrote down this information and defined some of this. This was something that you did all on your own. When we were using a Caring Bridge page for Lucy, and that was incredible. That you wrote these down, and you're so insightful. I love reading what you say. Sometimes it's really, really impressive to me.
That's really kind, because I describe my writing as just barfing on paper and seeing what comes out.
Your barf is very insightful. Okay, so right there, that's the humor. There's never a loss in your sense of you can never lose your sense of humor. And I think that, we've had 2 examples now in this podcast. Like, maybe we're the only ones that are finding this funny, Kyle.
Are.
But, that's great. That's great for us, and again, it's the community that you're in with the people.
I'm thinking of, so we had, well, let's not describe what happened, but we had one of your Mother's Day gifts, like both of us, wound up. So Mother's Day is important to us because it is a year ago. Mother's Day is the day we decided that I would go into rehab. And then with going through the loss of Lucy, like there's a lot of desire to make this Mother's Day extra special. So Alyssa got a gift every night of Mother's Day week, and just like one of the nights we ended up laughing so hard that honestly both of us genuinely said it's the hardest we've laughed in our lives.
Yeah.
And it was really special and really meaningful that we could have that experience together, going through what we went through. She's like grimacing and kind of like,
I'm just trying to figure out how you're gonna like
move off of this one. No, I'm not. I'm gonna leave everyone hanging. I'm not describing anything. Let your imagination
run wild, I guess. Is the bottom line. But I guess really the bottom line is like having, okay, so you and I will call it a community, but like having that community where there is still humor, there's still joy to be found in life has been incredibly important. So yeah, there's that one. Check. We continue to grow in our spiritual beliefs as well, and how that makes the suffering bearable. Like just today at our church service, they were talking about like the experiences that we have in life and how they make us stronger to go through even harder experiences, and how we think what is hard in the beginning isn't necessarily the only hard thing we're ever going to go through in life, and how everything we do prepares us for the really hard things. And you've said this before, and it just like, gosh, it just felt like it stood out to me so much today. Like you went through 12 hard years and suffered greatly during that time, and suffered alone greatly during that time. And not that you would like inflict that upon yourself to make yourself stronger, but ultimately it did make you stronger. And the practices that you have had to put into place, as you said earlier, in terms of being able to handle the difficult scenarios as they come up and emotionally, register them and continue on with your life, like that has come because of your alcoholism.
Right.
And, so I just think, gosh, it's just, God just talks to you sometimes in these settings. And today was one of those days. So that was, another reminder of that.
Yeah. Well, we had an experience last week. So a week ago, it was our 6th wedding anniversary, and Alyssa and I have it's a really cool thing that we do every single year, ritual that we do every year. We have been far from perfect, but we attempt to be somewhere
We're
unique.
Always somewhere, Kyle.
I know we attempt to be somewhere kind of like unique, push us to travel, see different places for our anniversary. And then on our anniversary, we reread the vows that we wrote individually and then spoke to each other on our wedding day. And then after reading our vows, we actually take the GPS coordinates of where we were when we read it, and then we write a little half page to 1 page. There's these tiny notebooks, so literally a sentence or two about where we are, how we're feeling, basically, and what is turning into an annual check-in. Because, and the reason I really realize that this year is, I got 3 words into rereading my vows and just broke down. It was like a really heavy release of a lot of weight that had been bearing down on me. And what I realized in reading those words and thinking through where we have been in the past when we read them was this thought: how innocent we were. And innocent with regards to when we wrote them, when we first got married, and just life was nothing but potential, and not knowing what suffering that we had in store for us dealing with my alcoholism. And then innocent with regards to a year ago when we read them, we were in this incredible space that we will never be in again. And that space was the time when I left rehab on June 12th, and our anniversary is June 16th. And before we found out about Lucy's health condition on August 8th.
Yeah, there's always going to be that, there's periods in your life where you're always going to mark the before and the after.
Yes.
And this was probably August 8th, right?
8th, yeah. 8th.
August 8th is our before and after.
It is.
In terms of just not having that emotional pain that we now share as parents of Lucy.
Yep.
And of course there's the before and after when she was born. There's a before and after when she passed away. And we continue to have those, and we're going to continue to have those. There was of course a before and after of when our son was born, and there's pieces throughout your life. There's just these pivotal points that happen. And yeah, we were in a really cool space. You're right. Last summer when that was happening. And
yeah, it was interesting because I read your journal. I actually read both of our writings from our anniversary a year ago, and it was very interesting because in reading mine, you can feel the joy, the freedom, the excitement, and in reading yours, you can sense that with an underlying skepticism or uncertainty. Uncertainty is probably hesitation. Yes. And so there were pretty stark differences reading the two logs for the day, and then just knowing how everything played out. Again, for me, from my perspective, it was just this blissful, innocent time period in my life, because I knew my level of commitment to recovery, and I knew it down in my soul. But there's a lot of proof and trust gaining that's required for the loved one. And so it makes perfect sense that, Alyssa wasn't, while excited, there was still that underlying hesitation. And again, just like knowing what we had in store for us, it was just a lot for me. Like it very much, it was an example of a moment where just the emotion and the weight overwhelmed my system, and we just hugged and we embraced and we cried on the patio of the place that we were staying, or where we were reading them.
Yeah.
But then, kind of taking that lessons aspect and looking at the past 6 months, I was just trying to think through, like, well, I think we agree that basically those 6 original lessons were really amplified for us across the board. I think there were some new lessons that we have learned since Lucy's passing, and most of these that we've covered in part, but just to like deliberately call them out. Again, the depth of friendship, love, and connection that is possible by opening up and talking about her has really been incredible. I think there's a high potential during moments of loss, suffering, and grief to push away and to isolate. And kind of in the spirit of mirroring what we've been doing with my alcoholism and our struggle on that front, I think we took that same approach with our loss of Lucy, and instead of hiding and pushing people away and trying to put on a brave face even when we weren't feeling brave, I think we've just showed our scars a little more, and
I think we have a lot of pride too.
Oh my gosh,
in terms
yes.
of ourselves, our decisions that we made,
and her,
and throughout the process of being her parent in
Yes.
a living sense, and then also of her and what she was a strong little girl. Like,
Yeah.
she really, I
That
mean,
heart-
yes, there was a lot of science helping her out along the way, and
yeah,
adults really taking control and whatnot, but she was strong on her own, and
Yep.
she had to be the brave one and tell us that when it was her time to go too. And gosh, I just think like that couldn't have been easy for her either. Like it's just, you think about it that way, and what she was experiencing. Maybe I'm giving, more drama to the story than what there actually was in the scenario, but I don't know. We're very proud of her, and
yep.
I think that we enjoyed talking about her for that very reason, and
Yeah.
hopefully it doesn't, like, again, we choose the scenario, read the audience, and
Yep.
when we are doing that, and everyone is so respectful of listening and hearing our story, and I don't know. I just think that we're very grateful for even the time that we were given with her, because not to compare us to others, but like there are scenarios where people are given less time with their children.
Right.
And
we got to hold her. We got to see her eyes open.
Yeah. There was so much that we did get with her, and it was, I don't know. It was what it was, right?
Yeah.
It was very special to us. And it's still fresh, it's very, very fresh to us right now.
Yeah. And another one along the lines of pride, and pride's really difficult, because I honestly haven't I know pride is one of the like cardinal sins, but it's hard to look at our story and what we've gone through and not have some pride in ourselves, in us as a couple, and in Lucy, in our family, in our friends, just everything about it. But one of the aspects with regards to us is being intensely deliberate about selecting our marriage every single day. And what I mean by that is, it's just like relapse and addiction. The stats aren't good with regards to relationships and marriage after intense moments of loss or grief or suffering. And from the very start, we were committed to ensuring that we move through this together and that we sustained our marriage. This is what marriage vows talk about, that when you're in your 20s, it's sort of almost like, yeah, of course we'll stick through anything that comes our way. Like we're committed and loving, and it's like
you don't understand the depths of what that might be.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and just the fact that, man, this might be a little off the rails and controversial, but like, I don't know, marriage or a wedding ceremony is also often just like so grounded, and as it should be, in like love. And love is like placed center stage. But holy cow, love's been there for sure, but there's been a lot more that has sustained us and kept our marriage active and strong during this. Being respectful of how the other person is progressing through difficult moments, because to me, it's been so obvious. There have been like very obvious forks in the road and moments where it's like, oh, this is clearly a time where I can choose to act and react a certain way, and it is going to push us apart and create a rift in our marriage. Or I can select oftentimes not always the harder road, but oftentimes the like more difficult path, and practice patience and respect and understanding and listening, and deliberately choose our marriage.
Mm-hmm. And another thing too is that we've had to really, we change, we've grown, but we also have to relearn in some ways as a result of like 12 years of addiction, and mm-hmm. then essentially 9 months, we'll say, of focus on a baby, and then, getting through the deep parts of the grief. And now it's like, okay, who are we on the other side of all of this?
Exactly.
We've changed. We're just, fundamentally still the same people, but we have changed a lot too. And so, we reevaluate, like, what does that look like now for our future and our marriage?
Yeah. One thing that stands out to me, this is pretty tactical, but it's been an important enough aspect to our ability to learn how to live with the loss of Lucy, and that is a recommendation that one of the care team members gave us in the hospital. I don't recall who gave it to us, but I do know it came to us in the hospital. And that was that during the first year of living through and living with the loss of a loved one, that seasonal changes were going to be difficult. And they encouraged us to take time and be intentional about time as a family, to check in as a couple, to check in and just recognize again the fact that seasons are changing. The world is moving on. That's not moving on, but that's what makes these seasonal changes so difficult. And it is as hard as this person said. I mean, when the leaves start, or when the trees start budding leaves and the weather's warming up and the snow disappears and the flowers are blooming, you just realize all of a sudden that winter was Lucy's month. Winter was her time here on earth. The Christmas season forever will be hers. And to see the world moving on into the spring season is just like this. Hey, whoa, am I ready? Are we ready? I don't know if we're cool with this. And so being intentional about taking time, and we've stepped away from even our home, and we've taken time off work, and we've just checked in with each other and just not busied ourselves, but we've made sure there's space and time for us to discuss how we've been doing over the past few months, to talk about Lucy, to engage with people from our community, and so on. So
yeah, it's been a really cool thing that was recommended to us, and I'm glad that we did start doing, I should say, because we are only through two seasons now. And we've also, we hit Mother's Day, we hit Father's Day. Those were, probably maybe considered to be the hardest holidays we're going to have to go through until we hit Christmas, I would say, where we're, really in hitting that first year milestone, like just in anticipation now, I guess. But the Mother's Day, Father's Day one was like, okay, how do we address this? Because we are parents to both of our children.
Yep.
And we are doing what we can to honor each of them the way that they need to be honored, and love them the way that they need and deserve to be loved. And so, like making those days just really special. Like Kyle did a great job. He gave me a whole week of celebration, which was much appreciated. And then we were on vacation for Kyle's Father's Day, and so it was also our anniversary. So it was all just like, it was a big day of celebrating, a lot of emotions, and we just kind of gave each other the space to have the emotions that we were going to experience on those days. Like I remember on Mother's Day, it was like I could make it through until about like 3:00, and then at 3, just like had to go take a little time to myself and cry, and I just needed a moment alone to process and not push past the fact that like I was experiencing my first Mother's Day without my daughter.
Yeah.
So, those days have been important. These check-ins or breaks that we're taking too are really important to us as well. And who knows, we might decide to continue them on for quite some time here.
Yeah.
But that was definitely an important add-on that we've done this year.
Yeah. And one aspect, and again, tactical item that we've done relating to both of the last 2 lessons with regards to our marriage, and then, taking some intentional time. Alyssa and I have started doing a weekly relationship check-in. We just kind of have a few prompts that we walk through, and it's our chance to just set things aside and, look into each other's eyes and just chat about how we're doing, how we're feeling, what are we nervous about, anxious about, and what I've discovered
what we're proud of too.
What we're
like
proud
I think
of.
That was a big one again, just in terms of like bringing back that confidence piece for both of us. Sorry, I cut you off.
No, that's it. And then just kind of, we've covered a lot here, but in closing, and it might seem like kind of an odd closing question, but does it even feel real that 6 months has passed to you?
I know. It doesn't. It's like, I don't know.
It feels, what I wrote down and the way I've thought of it is like, it truly feels dreamlike. There are moments, like I was saying, I really haven't lost the thought of Lucy in my mind. But there are moments where I have this realization that it actually happened, and that I realize I was kind of in this dreamlike state in thinking about her. And those snapback moments that cause you to realize, like, no, gosh, we did move. We did lose a daughter. We did watch her fight, and just realize the reality of everything that we went through is fairly surreal. And I think in the early months that caused a lot of emotion and breakdown. And I think as time passes on and the more we talk about her and the more, again, we learn to live with the loss, the more those moments like do not rock you as much.
Right. The waters are a little more calm.
Mm-hmm.
You had said this once, and I don't remember if it was in your newsletter or where exactly. I kind of think it was in the Caring Bridge page originally, but you had mentioned how, like, we're going to come back to Idaho, and from anyone who happens to walk by our house, we look from the outside to be exactly the same as we were when we left. We're still 2 parents, 1 child, and a dog. And,
who doesn't listen?
And you know, that just, it is externally what it looks like, but internally how much we've changed and will continue to change through this experience. And I think that I agree with you. It's almost dreamlike sometimes when you think back to what we went through, and I think it catches you when you least expect it. It's that grief. It's the rocky waters of grief. I think for me, there's a little bit more of a physical reminder of it still, as I am physically recovering still from the extreme places that my body was taken to in this experience. But no, I totally agree. It's just, you know, you can go on with your normal work day, let's say, and you get to the end of the day and it's like, yeah, I was able to function through it all, but like this still happened to me.
Yeah. And I think in closing, just, you know, the amount of love and support that we've been given by those in our lives will not ever be forgotten by us.
Yeah. It means more to us than anyone will probably ever know.
Yeah. There really are no words to describe it, but
I think also I just want to put out there that if anyone is struggling with something that they want to reach out to us about, that we're an open book, an open household here in terms of listening. Our door is always open, and
not
you're
literally,
welcome.
but
you're welcome to bring us your story, and if you need help, like we're still working through it for sure, but we're here to listen too.
Yeah. And just my love and admiration for you as a mother and a wife is beyond words. I don't think I could have gone through this with anyone else.
I don't think I could have either. You continue to just make me so proud to be your wife as well, and to have gone through all of this with you, and you were exactly the person that I needed during that time, and you continue to be that person that I need now. So those vows that we said all those years ago, and the decision we just made to marry each other was
good call.
Good call.
Across the board. All right. Thank you all for listening. Love you all. Take care. If you enjoyed this podcast, share it with others or give us a rating on your channel of choice. My hope is that my story can help others in their struggles with addiction or any other aspects of life that they feel could be bettered. You can follow us on social media at Chapter 3 Stigma on Instagram and YouTube. I cannot solve your problems for you, but I can listen. If you want to reach out with a message through one of those channels, I will respond and let you know that you are not alone. All the best, you are loved, and life is worth every struggle and bit of suffering you have to endure. Until next time.